Oh, so good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Eduardo. I am working as a research engineer in the ATIM cluster, for those of you who don't know me. And today we are very glad to be hosting this session in the context of the ResC4EU project. Today we will have a webinar talk presented by Aidan, by Director of MOAT Business Consultants, and he will discuss some of the practical lessons and what is working in the context of helping strengthen the supplier chain resilience here in Ireland. So before we give the floor to Aidan, I would like to first give a very brief introduction to what the ResC4EU project is. So the purpose of this project is to support the creation of strong and resilient supply chains across businesses in Europe. And the way we are doing this is particularly for SMEs. We are providing access to digital tools, training, knowledge, and networking opportunities for SMEs and tech-savvy SMEs. So we are trying to link in the, let's say, less experienced SMEs with more experienced or tech-savvy SMEs, and providing also access to other useful resources. So the consortium of this project is composed by the members here. We are across 7 European countries, and it includes 7 clusters. And in total, we are 10 partners, counting besides the 6 clusters. We have 2 SMEs and ISL as well in Fraunhofer. So if next slide, please, Aidan. If you would like to learn anything more about this project, please follow us in our social media, access the website, or you can get in touch directly with the members with this email, or you can also get in touch with me or Katrina. We will be very happy to discuss any further details, to give you more information, or if you want any opportunities to collaborate with this project, we will also be very happy to hear about that. So now I would like to give the floor to you, Aidan.
Okay, thanks, Eduardo. So my name's Aidan Farnan. As Eduardo said, I'm Director at MOAT Business Consultants. We are a consultancy specializing in business process optimization, digital transformation, and supply chain. So yeah, first off, just thanks, Eduardo, for organizing everything, and thanks to Katrina at ATIM for hosting the webinar today, and also thanks to ResC4EU for their webinar series, which this is part of. So if you haven't been to any others, I've been to a couple. They're quite interesting just to learn what else is going on around Europe. So please do look out for them. And yeah, thanks for hosting and organizing. So yeah, MOAT Business Consultants, we are an all-Ireland consultancy with offices in Belfast and Dublin. Sectors typically served are pharma, life science, medical device, manufacturing, engineering, financial services, and public sector. So today I'm just going to give some overview of our learnings from recent work that we're doing with clients and in the public sector, and I'm going to focus in on a couple of projects that we've been running for Intertrade Ireland, specifically related to supply chain. So just a wee bit about us here to the context of how I've tried to set out today's talk. We try to bring deep operational experience across manufacturing, engineering, life sciences, and the food sectors. Our approach centers on practical delivery and measurable outcomes, and we work with SMEs, preparing them for supply chain engagement. But we also work with anchor large multinational organizations, helping them build resilient supplier networks. So the insights that I'm trying to share here today are based on our learnings, based from direct experience engaging with buyers and large companies, and and suppliers like SMEs in the Irish supply chain and the challenges they face on the ground. So I'm happy to take questions throughout the day. We're a compact enough group today to manage that. So if anybody wants to turn on their mic and jump in, feel free. I'd love it to be interactive. Or if you want to leave a message in the chat, and Eduardo can throw it up to me when it comes through. So I just wanted to give an overview of the supply chain ecosystem, and I can't really cover it all here, but just to give a feel for that, and maybe for people in ResC4EU that sit outside Ireland, just some of the bodies and organisations involved here. So if you look at these three kind of areas, they're about being enablers and reducing silos. So on the left, we've got public sector bodies like Enterprise Ireland. That's a national agency supporting Irish companies to scale internationally and develop export markets. You've got their counterpart in Northern Ireland, which is InvestNI, which is an economic development agency pretty much doing the same thing, helping SMEs grow and export. And then you've got the All-Ireland trade body, Intertrade Ireland, who are more focused in cross-border trade across the island. So those are the three main public bodies. There's a number of industry bodies and clusters, which I can't put them all here. I see there's a few on the call as well that I haven't mentioned, so apologies for that. Industry bodies like ADS Group, who are a UK-based group, but they also work across Ireland and cross-border. So they're an aerospace defence group. You've got company organisations like IPFA, the pharmaceutical and supply chain focus, Biopharmachem, Manufacturing NI, who work around manufacturing policy in Northern Ireland, capability and competitiveness, and Irish MedTech Association. So, and of course, the cluster organisations, which are hugely important in pulling together our supply chain. I have ATIM at the top there, not just because we're on the call today, but because we are active members and advocates for what ATIM are trying to do. It's a great cluster. And there are other great clusters around Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. You've got Mid-Ulster Mega there, focusing on precision engineering, fabrication, Polymer Connect, Northern Ireland Advanced Composites and Engineering, Irish Manufacturing Research, really good innovation hubs that give access to cutting-edge technology for SMEs and large businesses to perform research and development with capability that they maybe don't have in-house. So that's just to give you an overview of the ecosystem. So I'm going to focus in on Intertrade Ireland because the last 2 years we've been delivering supply chain programs for them, and a lot of what we're presenting here is based on generic feedback from different clients, but also from what we've learned on these programs, and also how that's kind of focusing policy across Ireland as well. So we have delivered 2 programs, one in 2024 and one 2025, which is just finished. So the first one there, the supply chain and sourcing program, it was aimed at resilience within the SME kind of area. So small to medium-sized enterprises want to build resilience and continuity in their own sourcing capability. So it was about helping them understand where their weaknesses are in their supply chain, helping strengthen that, and looking for cross-border or all-Ireland solutions to improving sourcing strategies. So the objectives there were identifying risks, dependencies, points of failure, improving existing supplier networks and sourcing exposure, exploring local cross-border alternative sourcing, and increasing SME awareness. So key emphasis was just around resilience and diversification for those SMEs. So the Supply Chain Accelerator was just finished in December. Slightly different program in the sense that it was all about aligning large buyers with the SME supply chain in Ireland. So more focused on buyer alignment and SMEs being procurement ready and enabling market access for them. So the main aims are really reducing barriers to entry to multinational supply chains for SMEs. And we did that through improving their readiness to procure, supporting the development of credible commercial pipelines really was the ultimate goal. So we would do that through improving the readiness through getting qualifications and onboarding requirements set up before they begin conversations with large buyers, strengthen their understanding of what the buyer expectations were, and supporting the engagement between them. So we give them forums for the SMEs and the anchor companies to engage. And ultimately, we try to help them develop credible procurement aligned sales pipelines and generate business. And reducing friction was, the main aim. So yeah, any questions on that so far? All making sense? Okay, so I'll just give a little bit more detail then on the 2024 project. So the supply chain and sourcing program, some high level overviews here of what it was. So it focused on the manufacturing and engineering sector. We did gap analysis on 30 SMEs. So we went out to them, we sat with them for a day or two and did a gap analysis across their supply chain and across their business operations in relation to supply chain. So it was wide and varied. We would assess, their digital capability, their ESG, cyber stance, their stock management, logistics, warehousing, and then we would actually go through and do a map of their supply chain to see where the main risks were. So 30 companies received that. Some of them took those reports and went on and implemented them in their business, but 23 then went on to a mentoring, one-to-one mentoring stage where they were provided between 5 and 8 days of one-to-one mentoring with us on how to plug the gaps in their supply chain. So there were a number of different outcomes from this program, but I've just picked out 2. So one of the main things that the companies identified was regulatory burden. So a lot of regulatory pressures coming down from large suppliers to small businesses that they were struggling or unable to understand maybe in some respects and needed support around how they dealt with those regulatory requirements. But the number one biggest issue that they reported, I guess, when we looked at their supply chain risks, there were risks and there were some low-hanging fruit that we could help them with. We could find another supplier in Ireland maybe that was a backup supplier, so it built resilience, and occasionally we were able to replace suppliers that were in the Far East or other parts of the world with an Irish indigenous supplier, which was a great win. But in the main part, they were generally if they were a well-established company, their supply chain was reasonably good. But the number one biggest issue for them was they couldn't get into the supply chain of big players that were here on the island. And I think that probably flowed into Intertrades Ireland's reasoning to instigate the next supply chain program in 2025. So then came along the Supply Chain Sales Accelerator in 2025. It focused on 2 sectors, pharmaceutical and manufacturing. On that program, we had 25 SMEs. Each of those SMEs, again, it started with a baseline audit and gap analysis, more focused this time on being procurement ready. So, what are the challenges and risks and issues with trying to engage with multinational companies? And the program also facilitated 3 residential workshops for each company, including the anchor companies, where we worked on different aspects of making them procurement ready, and then an average of 8 days mentoring, one-to-one mentoring to help them build sales pipeline and build capability. So we had 5 anchor companies on this program, so multinational organizations, 2 in the pharma sector, and 3 in the manufacturing. The 2 in the pharma sector were Sanofi and Almac. So for those of you that don't know, Sanofi is a large drug producer, French-based, I think, but they have large operations here in Ireland. And Almac's an indigenous Irish pharmaceutical company. So that was the 2 large companies on the pharmaceutical side, and then we had 3 on the manufacturing side, who were RLC Aerospace, a tier 1 aerospace contractor, and we had Finnebrogue, who are a food manufacturer, and Encirc bottling company, who are a massive operation. Used to be the old Quinn Glass operations, now called Encirc. So those anchor companies presented opportunities for the SMEs to try and fulfill. We sourced SMEs that were, aligned with those opportunities across the 5 anchor companies. So, and then we helped them through workshops and one-to-one get their procurement readiness up to speed. And the other figure there, 17.65 million. It's indicative potential sales pipeline that was recorded through the program. So some of that was directly related to opportunities arising on the program, and others were facilitated by the learnings and the procurement kind of improvements that we made to these SMEs. So a huge potential return on investment there. So I'll stop there for a second. Does anyone any queries or questions or on that? Nope. All good. Okay. So why this session? Why now? So I think it's worth just taking a second to understand that there's growing pressures that our supply chain faces. It's unprecedented disruption, geopolitical shifts, regulatory changes, sustainability demands, and they're creating complexity across every sector, and indeed across the globe. So there's useful learnings to come out of what we've seen around this. There's rising expectations. So procurement teams in large businesses are demanding more. They're demanding transparency, compliance, risk mitigations, ESG, cyber, and the bar for suppliers qualification has risen substantially. So that is the kind of setting that we're in at the minute. And practical insight, this session tries to focus on what actually worked in practice. So hopefully I can share a few things that might be useful to everyone based on our experience. So a little bit about Ireland's supply chain context. So we're international by nature. It's inherently cross-border, but we also struggle with that sometimes. We don't look at opportunities across the border, maybe as often as we should. It's about connecting SMEs and large enterprises across European and global markets. That's what Ireland's supply chain does. There's a lot of global organizations that are set up here. And that gives us a huge advantage to global markets as well as supplying those here on Ireland. There's a diverse industrial base, strong SME manufacturing sector, operates alongside major multinational anchors, pharmaceutical, medical device, technology, food production. I could go on. But it's a bit of a pressure cooker environment. So there's regulatory compliance, resilience demands, sustainability pressures, all being pushed down onto the supply chain. So suppliers need to prove their capability and not just claim it. And of course, there's European relevance here. We're a European-based country. With the challenges that we face here will be mirrored across the EU, and indeed across the globe. So I've tried to pull out some key pressure points in what we've learned. So the challenge for SMEs, it's not, what we've seen was not really a capability challenge. It's more maybe struggling with visibility, getting their foot in the door. They maybe lack access to the right procurement contacts, and they don't know how to translate technical capability into buyer value at times. The buyer challenges, on the other hand, procurement teams are thinking about risk, compliance pressures, supplier qualification complexity, and finding credible and ready suppliers is maybe harder than it should be. So all of that really just comes to the problem of an alignment gap. So capability exists, but remains invisible or misaligned with procurement reality. And the connection between suppliers and what buyers often need is sometimes broken. So the core issue here, really, if you could describe it in one word, would be friction. But think of it not as technical friction. It's not so much about capability. Yes, we need capability here in Ireland. We need, all the good suppliers that we have. We need innovation. We need all that, but you can almost take that for granted that we have that. The issue that we've identified is more that friction, structural friction, and how we enable that capability to make its way through to large businesses that are set up here in the island. So one of the things we've noticed is that sales and procurement can operate in different languages, and technical excellence doesn't always translate through automatically into procurement confidence. So SMEs need to understand that. They need to engage buyers before they're truly ready. Because if they don't, it can damage their credibility in the long run. So the solution, based on what we're kind of seeing, is it's not only, I would say, maybe not only about better technology or better capability development. Yes, we need that, of course, but it's about creating the structures, language, and preparation that enables more opportunity across the supply chain in Ireland. So anything we can do to enable that will really set free all the capability and potential that we have in the supply chain here, which is large. So some of the common mistakes that we've observed are engaging too early. So SMEs sometimes approaching buyers too early before they're ready, and that can be damaging. First impressions matter enormously. So what we're encouraging is engage with them, but understand their requirements rather than jumping in with, this is what we've got to sell, and going through a tender process or trying to sell something that you're not ready to do. Don't oversell the technical details. So procurement teams tend to care maybe more about risk than capability. They obviously need the capability, they need the quality product, they need the on-time delivery. All those things are needed, but they have many of those across their supply chain. What you need to be aware of is their appetite for risk and how you help them with that. So don't lead with the technical capability. Almost get the regulatory stuff out of the way, and then you can show what you can do. And number 3, they're underinvesting in credibility. Again, don't underinvest in that. It takes time to be procurement ready, to get all your compliance in place, to get your quality management systems, to have a sustainability plan, whatever your buyers need. Have it in place, have a pack ready to go. And don't treat sales and supply chain separately. A sales team that doesn't understand what the supply chain buyers want, then there can be misalignment there, and you don't get through that final hurdle. So what buyers are really optimizing for? So just to labor the point, I guess, a little bit, they aren't optimizing for the best quality or lowest price in isolation. They are trying to manage complex trade-offs across risk, compliance, continuity, and cost and quality. So ease of onboarding really matters to them. Suppliers who integrate smoothly into existing systems, reporting structures, quality frameworks will reduce that burden. So long-term reliability sometimes trumps short-term capability. And I have a good example of that. One of the companies we were working with recently, an engineering company, they have all the cutting-edge technology, really well-run company. They're producing quality products on time, serving a number of different customers very well. But they were trying to get into the supply chain of a large aerospace provider, which would have been a golden ticket for them. So they were quite confident coming to a sales pitch with that aerospace buyer. You know, they pitched, showed what they could do, showed that they're a capable and quality supplier. But the buyer basically said, look, that's a great presentation, but we've got about 5 or 6 suppliers that can do the same thing that you do. What else are you going to do for us? And the sales guy on the engineering team side was a bit taken back, but he said, look, what can I do? And the answer that came back was, okay, so we need you to help us with our ESG commitments that we have. So what can you do around that? We need to reduce risk. We need you to get cyber security credentials. You know, if you have those and one of the other suppliers doesn't, then it gives you a leg up. So they give them a number of things to go through. And to be fair to that company, they went off, they got extra quality management things in place. They did a cybersecurity audit and got Cyber Essentials and Cyber Plus certification. They also did an ESG kind of thing with their local technical college and reskilled some of the students coming out of there. And they were able to show that they had a social commitment, and that all helped them get in the door with this large buyer. And up until that point, they didn't realize how important that was. So that's just one example, but there are many similars like that. So the role of programs, clusters, initiatives here, you know, de-risking engagement, I think, is important. Programs like the Supply Chain Accelerator and indeed ResC4EU, creating safer spaces for buyer-supplier connection and reducing risk for both parties is really valuable. And it wasn't the supply chain stuff that we've done with Intertrade, that the feedback wasn't only helpful for the SMEs. The anchor companies really actually appreciated that chance to engage with the SMEs, to show them the requirements. And actually, we were very willing to work with suppliers that maybe weren't 100% ready, but they were on that journey and knew what they needed to do. So, so preparing SMEs properly, having effective initiatives like this, getting them genuinely ready before market exposure, I think is a real, it's an area of focus that we should have across programs and clusters and other initiatives. So creating the structured dialogue, again, that was one of the main feedbacks on the Supply Chain Sales Accelerator, was having that forum where large buyers, procurement teams could engage with a selected SME cohort in a structured environment was like hugely successful and interesting and useful for both sides. And I think the important thing then, the last point there, focusing on outcomes. So the best program, you know, they don't talk about just, you know, events attended or connections made. It's actually what did we get out of that program really? You know, supplier onboarding, long-term relationships, monetary potential or return. So look, what we've talked about here is, you know, transferable across Europe. It's not Ireland-specific challenges. Buyer behaviour is consistent across Europe, across the globe. Procurement priorities are risk, compliance, continuity, and buyers are evaluating suppliers like that, and it's predictable. You know, we know what it is, so we should enable our SMEs to know that too, and a lot of them don't. an interesting point, alignment can beat scale. So if you have a supplier who is not as big as another supplier, they can often beat them by being procurement ready, having all their ducks in a row, having all their compliance and regulatory stuff is gold dust to those big companies' procurement teams, because they know they can onboard somebody, they can get them through all their checklists, and they can be a reliable supplier. And then they're happy to work with them even to get their capability up to speed after that. So this kind of structure, I think, enables resilience across the supply chain. So, lessons there for us here in Ireland, but also across Europe too. So key takeaways, I would say resilient supply chains are built, not discovered. So alignment, preparation, and trust matter most. Capability without credibility goes nowhere. Visibility without readiness damages relationships. Structure without buyer engagement kind of misses the point. So supply chains that withstand that disruption are the most genuine, are those built on genuine preparation, clear communication, and sustained commitment to alignment between the buyers and the suppliers. So that almost brings me to the end, but we'll have some time for Q&A. If anyone is interested in anything that I've presented here, both from an SME perspective or an anchor organization, or for that matter, trade bodies or clusters, please do reach out. I'm happy to have a chat about it. We're hoping to explore future supply chain capability programs. So if you're interested in what you've seen here, please reach out and we can get you on a waiting list for future programs. But yeah, thanks everybody for your time and for listening to me today. I hope it's been useful. I'd love to take some questions if you have them.